All right, you guys, welcome back to Becoming Better Daily. Today, I'm going to be talking about the topic of showing up in excellence. This is a crucial topic to really talk about because I think it's one that's overlooked, and I think it's one that really can begin to help us to walk on our journey in a stronger way. So, I just want to start with this example, right? And I think this is one that a lot of people can relate to. Have you ever joined like some kind of group or some type of shared space where people were showing up and they were operating in the way that they always have, but it just seemed to over time people got lax and it wasn't necessarily in excellence, right? And so what I notice is that whenever I see a new person, or I've seen people literally tell the new person like, you don't have to work that hard, it's literally like a thing. They try to bring them into this culture, right? And so when that person comes into this culture and they are ready to shift, they want to work, they want to actually see change happen, and the typical keeping the company or whatever it is up, that's when we usually find trouble, right? And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. We don't become a threat until we start to operate in our excellence. And so until we start to operate and perform at the level that God intended us to. Okay. So here's the thing. God intended for us to do great works, right? God already says that. I'll get that scripture where he talks about how we were already created to do good works, right? And great works, right? That is not the way we get our salvation, but that was how we were designed to be. So we think about this. Most people are not showing up in the way we were designed to show up at their job or in the common spaces in the world, right? Or wherever places that they take up. And then when someone does show up, this aggravates them, because I'll tell you why. Because this shows the heart posture. This shows what's really inside of us. And this is what the enemy does not necessarily like to see. I want to think about the example of Cain and Abel, right? So this story is so interesting to me because this was his own brother. Cain and Abel, as you may know, and if you haven't, go back to Genesis 4 and check this out. But Cain actually killed his own brother. But let's go back into the story. What happened was there were two brothers. They were both born, right? One was born with the role of he just herded the sheep. He watched the sheep. So Abel, he watched the herds, he watched the sheep, and that's what he did. Now Cain's job was to toil the land. To basically, he was a farmer, right? And so in that moment, they're both taking on their role, they're both doing their job, and it gets to this interesting space, right? This unknown brotherly rivalry. Wow, how can you say that? Rivalry that comes up. And the reason it comes up is because both of them bring an offering to God, and this is where they show their heart, right? Abel gives God his first flock, the fattest flock, the best of the best, right? He shows God like, hey, I love you so much. Thank you for all this that you gave me and done to me, for me, and gave him his best. Now, Cain, on the other hand, gave him what he gave him. Like, he had what he had and he just brought it, right? Which is fine because at least he thought right about God. But now when these two offerings stand in front of God, God is not pleased with Cain's offering because he knows the heart intention behind it, right? Like Cain didn't give him the first, he didn't really act in excellence, he acted in mediocrity, right? He was like, I'll give you whatever, instead of being like, I want the best of the best in that excellence. And so it's interesting because in that moment, this is where it gets interesting. It's the same thing that we see today. God turns around, God asked him, he says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and it desires you, but you should rule over it. So basically, God is telling them like, hey, I'm not pleased with it, but if you do well, like, you will be accepted. It's not like I'm saying no, but he was trying to do a work in his heart, and he wasn't willing to do that. So he, as a response, even though God warned him that, like, sin lurked at his door, and that it wanted to take over him, but he shall rule over it, he decided to act out of anger and kill his own brother. And I see this, maybe not with a brother, but I just see this a lot when we go into spaces that, number one, we are called to be in excellence. And there's times where I show up in mediocrity, and then it's hard, right? So I want to acknowledge that. But I do want to say that when we show up in excellence, we bring light. Like that excellence is the light, right? Like in so many places in this world, there's no hope. In so many places in this world, people feel like they've been working the same thing or doing the same thing over and over until somebody brings a new way of thinking, until somebody brings a light. And so when we show up in excellence, we show up in the way that God intended to show up in this world. Look around me, look at these trees. Everything God created was in excellence. And so we were created to make excellent things too. And when we do that, people can see the true heart of God. Number two, when we show up in excellence, it makes people perform intentionally, right? So either they have to look at themselves, evaluate themselves, and say, hey, I haven't been showing up, and what do I need to shift? And so these are the people who usually shift and do begin to walk in their calling. And then there's the other half, which are like Cain, right? They attack the person's character, right? Or that person, right? Or they might say that they're a show off, or that's what you might see in the world, or they try to dismantle the name that they've built over time, saying this is what they used to be like. But this is what happens when we start showing up in excellence, right? Nobody says nothing when someone is showing up poorly. They're just like, okay, they might say a little bit, but it's not as bad. But the moment someone shows up in excellence, they're show off. And we all had the same 24 hours, just like God said, if you do well too, you will be rewarded for it. And then three, I talked about this a little bit. It exposes our heart posture, right? The areas for us to grow. So God says we should already be showing up excellence, because the Bible literally says do everything to the glory of God. So if we looked around the world right now and we see everybody doing everything to the glory of God, I mean, even if you had a crappy boss, even if you had the worst of the worst job on the food train, imagine how this world would function. We could see examples of that when we look at things like Chick-fil-A, right? Chick-fil-A is showing what it's like to show up in excellence as far as chicken, as far as customer service, as far as all of these things. And imagine that experience when we leave there and they're like, my pleasure, right? So imagine if we all showed up in that excellence everywhere we went. And the only way we really start to shift the culture, we really start to shift the world for the glory of God, is to become excellent. So yes, you will be getting attacked. Yes, there will be things that come at your way. Yes, there will be people who think that you're stuck up. Yes, there will be a lot of different challenges, but this is what you're called to do, to bring the light into the dark spaces. People don't always want light in dark spaces. You think about it, when someone's been, even ourselves, we've been asleep for hours in the dark, and then someone comes in and turns the light on. It's hard. It takes time to adjust. People are like, I need a second. And so continue to show up in excellence. Continue to understand that none of your work is done in vain, and also understand that we're going to get pushback, but this is the way that we bring the light in. This is the way we bear the light for Jesus Christ, and everything that we do is excellent. And it might upset people, it might irritate people for a while, but eventually, if they have the right heart posture, they'll change and shift too. And so I just wanted to encourage y'all, wherever you are, whatever job you're on, whatever you're doing right now, show up in excellence, because that is the way that we truly bring God's glory into different spaces of this world. Hey, that's the end of this video, you guys. I thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, whatever you want to do. Thank you guys. Peace.